U.S. Federal Reserve raises rates by 50 basis points. Social distancing measures in the city further relaxed. And Ukrainian troops still holding the Azovstal steel plant after weeks of siege and shelling.
Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The U.S. Federal Reserve intensified its fight against the country's worst inflation in 40 years, raising its benchmark interest rate by a half percentage point Wednesday.
That's its most aggressive move since 2000. The central bank also signaled that further large rate hikes are on the way. The key rate has been raised to a range of 0.75% to 1%, the highest since the pandemic struck 2 years ago. The Fed also announced a plan to reduce its balance sheet, with prices for food, energy, and consumer goods accelerating. The Fed said its goal is to cool spending. It hopes that with higher costs for mortgages, credit cards, and auto loans, consumer spending will be slowed to tame inflation. The Fed's chief made a direct appeal to Americans to hang tough as officials take the hard measures to bring it under control.
Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it is causing, and we're moving expeditiously to bring it back down. We have both the tools we need and the resolve that it will take to restore price stability on behalf of American families and businesses. The economy and the country have been through a lot over the past 2 years and have proved resilient. It is essential that we bring inflation down if we are to have a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all.
Well, here in Hong Kong, the Monetary Authority raised the base rate by 50 basis points to 1.25%.
While the authority called on home buyers to be cautious, experts played down the immediate effects on mortgage rates and home prices. Following the Fed's biggest one-time increase in rates in 22 years, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority also adjusted upward the base rate by 50 basis points to 1.25%. It also warned the adjustment would come at a faster pace than the last cycle.
The speed and magnitude of the Hong Kong dollar interbank rates catching up with their US dollar counterparts will still be subject to the supply and demand of the Hong Kong dollar funding in the local market. The public should carefully assess and manage the relevant risks when making property purchase, mortgage, and relevant decisions.
You stress the rate hike will not affect Hong Kong's monetary stability. After the U.S. Federal Reserve's rate hike decision, HSBC and Standard Chartered announced that they were keeping their best lending rates unchanged. An economic expert noted the aggregate balance of Hong Kong banks now stands at $300 billion, indicating an extremely high liquidity.
Perhaps the aggregate balance will gradually lowered because of the interest rate differences. Flow money will flow from Hong Kong to the United States. So the aggregate balance will gradually fall in around this next half year to around 30 to 10 billion. By that time, Hong Kong interest rate will increase.
He also believes this will have little immediate impact on those who are paying mortgage loans.
If you are buying your home for your own use, in the long run, just a few $100 increase per month, we are all expecting the interest rate to increase. This is not what is happening today. Everyone knows about this.
影響市場比較大因素咧，都係。
Meanwhile, founder of Centerline Group Shi Wing-cheng said with social distancing measures easing, more home buyers are willing to look at flats. He added that sales of first-hand properties in April had more than doubled that in March. He expects home prices to go up, but not drastically, in the second half of the year. Hong Kong's daily COVID tally edged up again as the city again recorded some 300 new infections.
With the Asia World Expo treatment facility having closed, the last batch of mainland medical staff who helped fight the fifth wave of infections left the city this afternoon. Caleb Leung has details.
The city reported 321 new COVID infections, including 17 imported cases today. Schools around town reported 26 cases, including 24 students and 2 school staff members. 2 of the infected students are from the same family and go to the same primary school. They stopped going to classes after they tested positive. Meanwhile, 5 more COVID patients died at public hospitals. One of them was a man taken to hospital early on Monday morning after he was found on the street in a state of confusion. The man's age is unknown as he did not carry any personal ID with him. He was later found to have suffered a brain hemorrhage. His viral load was low when he was taken to hospital, but his condition deteriorated and he died early on Wednesday morning. The other 4 patients who succumbed to the virus were aged between 86 and 97. So far, the 5th wave of COVID has claimed 9,120 lives. As the city's coronavirus situation has been gradually stabilizing, the last batch of mainland medical staff that offered their help to Hong Kong during the 5th wave of infections returned to the north side of the border today. A farewell ceremony was held for them this afternoon. Chief Executive Carrie Lam, the Deputy Director of the Central Government's Liaison Office He Jing, and Hospital Authority Chairman Henry Fan were in attendance. The CE thanked the medical staff for their work, while He Jing said the mainland always has Hong Kong's back. At around 4 p.m., the medical staff arrived at the Shenzhen Bay port, which means their work in Hong Kong is officially over. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The second phase of the relaxation of the city's social distancing measures began today. Several public facilities, including beaches, have reopened. Residents are also permitted to exercise outdoors and go mask-free in country parks. In the catering sector, 8 diners per table will be allowed at restaurants. Swimming pools will reopen next Thursday at the earliest, with the Leisure and Cultural Services Department citing a need for the premises to be filtrated and sterilized.
The mainland reported 5,038 new COVID-19 cases today. In Beijing, 42 confirmed cases have been reported along with 8 asymptomatic cases. Local authorities have told the public to work at home and mandated public transportation to partially halt operations in a bid to reduce the people flow. In hot-hit Shanghai, the megacity reported more than 4,000 cases, with most cases being asymptomatic. 13 patients died, their average age 82 years old. None of them were vaccinated. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, the island reported more than 30,000 new cases, breaking its daily infection record. The vast majority of infections emerged in New Taipei City and Taipei. The island reported 5 deaths, including a 20-year-old male who suffered from chronic illnesses.
The World Health Organization says the number of newly reported COVID cases and deaths continued to fall globally over the past week. The agency said there were about 3.8 million new infections and more than 15,000 deaths over the past 7 days. This comes despite South African authorities reporting an uptick in cases linked to the BA4 Omicron mutation. Still, the WHO believes there is not sufficient evidence to show the strain leads to higher rates of hospitalization or death. Meanwhile, an American study suggests that the Omicron variant may be as severe as previous COVID strands. Scientists from Massachusetts General Hospital, Minerva University, and Harvard Medical School analyzed records of 130,000 COVID patients over the past 2 years. They found the risk of hospitalization and mortality were nearly identical between periods when different strains were more dominant globally. Still, the team said the study, which is undergoing peer review, could have limitations. Among them, it could be potentially underestimating the number of vaccinated patients in recent COVID waves.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has tested positive for COVID-19. State Department spokesman Ned Price said Blinken tested positive in a PCR test yesterday. Blinken, who is isolating at home, is fully vaccinated and is experiencing only mild symptoms. Before testing positive, Blinken met Wednesday with the Swedish foreign minister and attended the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. Meanwhile, the State Department has condemned North Korea's launch of a ballistic missile towards its eastern waters yesterday. It said the launch is a clear violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. The launch also came 6 days before South Korean new president takes office. The U.S. has circulated a draft resolution to the UN Security Council seeking additional sanctions against North Korea for its tests this year. The Kremlin is denying Ukrainian reports that Russian forces are pressing their assault on the last stand of resistance in Ukraine's shattered city of Mariupol.
Attacks on the Azovstal steel mill reportedly resumed after dozens of civilians were evacuated, with many others still holding out in the battered facility. The United Nations and Red Cross have evacuated hundreds from Mariupol and other areas this week. More people were rescued yesterday, but none were from the steel plant. With hundreds of civilians and defenders still holed up at Azovstal, the UN is working behind the scenes to get more people out.
We all know the delicateness of the situation as it is. When we feel safe that we have something to announce, we will share that with you.
The evacuations follow the UN Secretary General's visit to Moscow to press Russian leaders to allow evacuations.
Mariupol is the most painful topic to discuss.
In an interview with the British broadcaster Sky News, Ukraine's foreign minister says the UN has a lot on the line.
This evacuation is taking place under the auspices of the United Nations. So the reputation of the United Nations is also at stake in this process. And we are 100% open to working with them because we need to save as many human lives as possible.
Kuleba says he does not anticipate peace negotiations with Russia will be successful anytime soon. He added that Ukraine is not afraid of Russia's missile terrorism tactics and will win the war because Ukraine has been left with no choice. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said many of those trapped at the steel plant will need to be dug out by hand because heavy equipment cannot be used to clear the rubble. Russia's military earlier said it would pause military activity at the steelworks to allow civilians to leave. Ukrainian forces said today they repelled Russian attacks in the east and recaptured some territory, even as Moscow moved to obstruct the flow of Western weapons to Ukraine by bombarding supply lines. Ukraine wants the West to ramp up the supply of weapons ahead of a potentially decisive clash in the Donbass. The European Union has proposed the toughest package of sanctions yet against Moscow for its war in Ukraine. The new measures include sanctions on Russia's top bank and a ban on Russian broadcasters from European airwaves, as well as embargoes on crude oil in 6 months. However, a handful of Eastern EU countries are concerned that the oil halt will not allow them enough time to adapt to the new situation. Hungary said it could only agree to the measures if crude oil imports from Russia via pipeline were exempt from the sanctions. Slovakia has asked for a 3-year transition period, and the Czech Republic is seeking a delay of 2 or 3 years. The EU faces the task of finding alternatives when energy prices have surged. It imports some 3.5 million barrels of Russian oil and related products every day. It also depends on Russia's gas supplies.
Bulgaria's parliament has approved additional aid to Ukraine following a debate that rattled the governing coalition. Lawmakers voted to allow repairs of Ukraine's heavy military equipment and seek ways to help Ukrainian exports of grains and electricity. But the vote circumvented proposals to provide direct military aid to Kiev. The government will further help Ukrainian refugees, support Ukraine's path into the EU, and provide humanitarian aid. Protesters for and against support to Ukraine demonstrated as lawmakers voted. Pro-Russian socialists in the 4-party governing coalition oppose the move. The country is among several EU members that have avoided sending arms and ammunition to Kiev. But Bulgaria has condemned the Russian invasion, supported sanctions against Moscow, refused to pay for Russian gas with rubles, and taken in Ukrainian refugees. Still ahead on tonight's news. Local elections in the UK today. A sneak peek of the MTR Exhibition Centre station. And Hong Kong's first incinerator capable of turning waste to energy now 40% complete.
Welcome back to TVB News. Local government elections are set to be held across Britain today.
The vote has been cast by some pundits as a test of support for embattled Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Dan Orell tells us more.
The result of the local government elections will decide almost 7,000 council seats across the UK and the makeup of 140 local government authorities. They are responsible for the day-to-day provision of public services in their areas. The results will not directly affect Prime Minister Boris Johnson's practical ability to govern in the House of Commons. That's because the vote does not cause changes to seats in Parliament. However, a poor showing from the Prime Minister's Conservatives could add weight to the arguments of Johnson critics within the party. This could prove problematic for Britain's leader, as a general election must be held before the end of 2024. Johnson has faced mounting scrutiny after becoming the first British leader in living memory to have broken the law while in number 10 Downing Street. This after he was fined by the police last month for attending a birthday gathering in his office in 2020, when the UK was in the midst of a pandemic lockdown. There's another pressing issue on the minds of the electorate: rising global energy prices, in part sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The hike has indirectly led to a rise in the cost of goods in UK shops. Ahead of the vote, Johnson attempted to reassure the public about the Tories' capability of addressing the matter without draining the national budget.
We've got to remember that we only have limited resources of taxpayers' money, so we have to be sensible about how we do it. But then deal with the supply-side issues that are causing the inflation spike. So there are issues particularly to do with the cost of energy that we can fix by making sure that we boost our UK energy supply.
Of particular interest to the Prime Minister and the Conservatives will be the London seats of Wandsworth and Westminster. Although traditionally Tory territory, they could now be within the grasp of the Labour opposition. Elsewhere, polls have suggested that Sinn Féin, an Irish nationalist party that seeks a united Ireland, could become the largest group in the Northern Ireland Assembly. That would hand Sinn Féin the post of First Minister in the Belfast government for the first time. And that would test the stability of the British region's power-sharing governance and talks on post-Brexit trading rules. The election results are expected to be known early on Friday. Dan Orell, TVB News.
Back locally, the East Rail Line cross-harbour extension will enter service in just 10 days. Here are some things to look forward to at the Exhibition Centre station. The walls painted in green and grey symbolise the colour of the Victoria Harbour. 3 unexploded bombs from World War II, each weighing 1,000 pounds, discovered during the line's construction process in 2018, will be on display at the station. Meanwhile, an artwork formed by 1,200 pictures taken by local artist Leung Chi Bo, who captured the harbour at different times, aims to give an impression that passengers are surrounded by the waves. To commemorate the 100th year of the East Rail, old pictures and train tickets of the line will also be on display. Hong Kong is building its first incinerator that can turn waste to energy, and the project is expected to be completed in 2025.
The Environmental Protection Department says the city's ability to transform waste to energy must quickly catch up with the rest of the world. Timothy Lee reports.
Currently, Hong Kong generates 11,000 tons of municipal solid waste per day. To achieve the goal of ending reliance on landfills for solid waste disposal by 2035, the government began constructing the iPark 1 incinerator on Shek Wu Chau in 2018. The project is capable of burning a third of the city's solid waste and transform it into electricity. This will then produce 480 million kilowatt hours of electricity that can meet the energy needs of 100,000 families. iPark 1 will occupy 16 hectares of land, with the Environmental Protection Department having already finished the land reclamation work. The incinerator's boiler and generator will be built on the mainland before being shipped to the city. As of now, the facility is about 40% done, with 2025 set as the target date for its completion. The government has also chosen Tuen Mun's Ash Lagoon as the location for the second iPark incinerator. However, Michael Lui, the Assistant Director of Waste Infrastructure Planning in the Environmental Protection Department, believes the city's waste burning ability is still much lower than its neighbors. He said Singapore and mainland cities like Guangzhou and Shenzhen already have multiple incinerators, and Hong Kong must catch up quickly. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.